He built rockets to reach the stars, but a 7-year-old girl asked him a question he couldn't answer. When Elon Musk sat alone in a quiet park, he wasn't expecting a child to challenge everything he believed about life, faith, and purpose. What she said next brought him to tears and changed everything. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. It was a warm afternoon in a quiet park nestled in the heart of a quiet neighborhood. The sun filtered gently through the trees, casting a golden glow on the sidewalks and grass. Clouds drifted lazily across the sky, unhurried, weightless, the kind of day that made time feel slower. Birds chirped softly in the distance, and the occasional sound of laughter echoed from the far side of the park, where a few children played near a swing set. Elon Musk sat alone on a wooden bench near a quiet walking path. Dressed simply, with no crowd around him and no team trailing behind, he looked like any other man taking a moment to breathe. His elbows rested on his knees, fingers loosely interlaced. His eyes stared forward but didn't seem focused on anything in particular. This wasn't a meeting. This wasn't about a new launch or a tech announcement. It was a moment of pause. He wasn't thinking about space or innovation. He was just still. A little girl ran past him, chasing the wind, her hair bouncing as she laughed freely. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her joy stood in stark contrast to Elon's introspection. Just as he reached to stand, she turned around and walked right up to him. Her voice was bright and curious. "Do you believe in God?" The question fell like a stone into still water, rippling through the silence. Elon froze. Elon blinked, caught completely off guard. The question, so bold, so unfiltered, didn't match the soft, innocent face looking up at him. He hesitated, searching for the right words, but realized honesty was the only option. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I've never been sure." The little girl didn't flinch or frown. She just nodded slightly, then replied with calm certainty. "God is real, you know." Her words were simple, but they struck something deep within him. She wasn't trying to convince him. She wasn't preaching. She was just stating what she believed, as naturally as someone would talk about the sky being blue. "Why do you believe in God?" Elon asked, more intrigued than skeptical. She smiled, her legs swinging gently as she sat beside him on the bench. "Because he's always with me, even when I can't see him." Elon turned slightly to look at her. Something about the ease in her voice, the lack of hesitation, it held a kind of wisdom he couldn't explain. He had met world leaders, scientists, philosophers, yet here was a child, speaking with the kind of certainty he had never felt. Without knowing it, a quiet bond began to form between them, a man of reason and a girl of faith. Elon Musk had built a life most people couldn't even imagine. Rockets, satellites, electric cars, artificial intelligence. His days were filled with calculations, innovation, and ambition. Everything he had achieved was grounded in reason, in provable systems, in things that could be explained and measured. He was a man of logic, shaped by data and driven by the belief that anything was possible with enough determination and intellect. But lately, something had shifted. Despite the breakthroughs and applause, despite the headlines and achievements, he had begun to feel a strange emptiness. It came in quiet moments, late at night or in the early hours of the morning, when the world was still and the noise faded. Questions crept in, questions that had nothing to do with engineering or science, questions about purpose, about meaning, about what truly mattered. He hadn't spoken those questions aloud. Not to anyone. He hadn't even admitted them to himself fully. But now, sitting on a park bench beside a little girl who spoke of God without hesitation, he felt those questions rising. This wasn't the kind of conversation he planned for. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't productive. And yet, it felt necessary. He wasn't trying to win an argument. He just wanted to understand. Elon sat quietly for a moment, watching the little girl as she swung her legs back and forth on the bench. Her presence was light, but the words she had just spoken carried surprising weight. He turned toward her, curious, almost hesitant. "But how can you believe in something you can't see or prove?" he asked gently, his voice calm, not confrontational. She didn't seem troubled by the question. Instead, she looked at him with clear eyes and said, "You don't have to see God with your eyes. Just feel him in your heart." Elon gave a small nod, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. He wasn't ready to accept what she was saying, but he was willing to listen. That alone surprised him. "I've always trusted what I can measure," he said after a pause. "If I can't test it or observe it, I've never really believed in it." She shrugged softly, like someone who didn't need to prove her point. "When I'm scared, or sad, or even really happy, I talk to God. And when I do, I feel better. I know he's listening." Elon's brow furrowed slightly. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, thoughtful. "Maybe that's just comfort," he said. "Maybe it's not really God. Maybe it's just something your mind does to feel safe." The little girl looked out at the trees for a moment, then back at him. Her voice didn't waver. "Sometimes, when I sit very still and everything is quiet, I feel like God is whispering to me, not with words exactly, just a feeling that I'm not alone, that everything will be okay." Elon stared at her, not with disbelief, but with genuine wonder. She wasn't making a case or trying to argue. She was simply sharing what she knew to be true, and that certainty, it unsettled him. He sat back, crossing one leg over the other, his gaze dropping to the grass. "You know, I've spent my entire life solving problems," he said. "I've built things to help people, to change the world, to push us forward. But I've never felt anything like what you're describing. I've never felt certain." She tilted her head, studying him. "You don't have to feel it all the time," she said, "but when you do, even just once, it changes things." He looked up, meeting her eyes again. "And you're sure? You've never doubted?" The girl smiled, not arrogantly, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had lived her truth. "Sometimes I wonder, but deep down, I still know. It's like when you miss someone, you can't see them, but you still feel they're with you." Elon didn't know what to say. Something inside him shifted, just slightly. He wasn't trying to challenge her anymore. He wasn't trying to disprove her experience. He just wanted to know how she could be so sure. Elon sat quietly, his mind turning over her words like stones in a stream. He had never heard someone speak of God in such a simple, grounded way, especially not a child. It unsettled something deep within him, something that had been buried under layers of logic and progress for years. After a long silence, he asked the question that had always stopped him cold. If God is real, why does he let bad things happen? The words came out softer than he expected, as if even asking them was an admission of how much they had haunted him. His eyes stayed on the horizon, where the sun hung lower in the sky, and a breeze stirred the leaves around them. The girl didn't answer right away. Her face, once filled with playful energy, turned thoughtful. "That's a hard question," she said quietly. "But my mom says we go through hard things so we can grow stronger." Elon looked at her, surprised by the seriousness in her voice. She continued, her words slower now, more careful. "My dad used to tell me that we only see part of the picture, like one little puzzle piece. But God, he sees the whole thing. So sometimes the part we're in doesn't make sense yet." Elon's mind flashed through moments in his own life, his lowest points, the times he had felt completely lost, sleepless nights before launches, public failures, personal heartbreaks. Moments of pain that felt meaningless at the time, but looking back, had shaped the man he'd become. What if those weren't setbacks? What if they were part of something greater? He'd always seen suffering as a flaw in the system, proof that if there was a God, he either didn't care or wasn't paying attention. But now, this little girl, sitting beside him in a park, was suggesting something entirely different. What if pain wasn't proof of God's absence, but part of the way He teaches us? That idea felt too simple to accept, and yet it also felt too profound to ignore. Elon looked down at his hands. "I've always thought pain was just part of the chaos of the world," he said. "Just something to survive, to fix, to move past." The girl didn't try to correct him, she just nodded and said, "Maybe it's both. Maybe it's messy and hard and scary, but still meaningful." He leaned back, resting against the bench. His tone shifted, less guarded now, less analytical. "What if I've spent my whole life missing the point?" he asked. "What if I've been searching for answers in all the wrong places?" The girl smiled gently. "Then maybe today is a good place to start looking in new ones." For the first time, Elon wasn't listening with his mind. He wasn't trying to analyze her answers or match them with evidence. He was listening with something else, something softer, more open. Her words didn't feel like arguments. They felt like truth. And that truth was beginning to reach a place in him he hadn't visited in a very long time. Elon watched her for a moment, then tilted his head slightly, his voice gentle but edged with curiosity. "You talk like someone who's been through something. Did something happen to you?" The little girl looked down at her lap, her fingers tracing soft lines into the fabric of her dress. The light in her eyes dimmed just a little, and her expression turned quiet, reflective. She nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, her voice softer now. "Something did happen." She didn't speak for a few seconds. Elon didn't rush her. He could sense this was something important. "Last year my mom got really sick," she said. "The doctors told us it was bad, that she might not make it. Everyone was scared." Elon's expression shifted. He had known fear on launch pads and boardrooms and hospitals, but hearing it from someone so young made it feel different. He waited as she gathered her words. "I didn't know what to do, so I prayed. Every night, I asked God to help her, even when I didn't know if He would. I just kept praying." Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. "Some nights I'd cry, and other nights I'd just sit there, really quiet. But every time I did, I felt like God was there. Not like magic or anything, just like I wasn't alone." She looked up at Elon, and then, little by little, she started getting better. The doctors didn't know why. They said it didn't make sense. But I knew. It was God. Elon's throat tightened. He didn't speak right away. The sincerity in her words, the weight of what she had shared, it hit him somewhere deep. Not because he had proof, but because he believed that she believed. "What if your mom hadn't gotten better?" he asked quietly, his voice low and strained. She was quiet for a moment, then looked him directly in the eye. "Then, He still would have been with us." That's what faith means. It's not just about getting what you ask for. It's about trusting that you're not alone, no matter what happens. Elon turned his face slightly, looking off into the trees, swallowing hard. That's not easy," he said. "No," she agreed softly, "but it's worth it." He nodded slowly, his expression somewhere between reflection and pain. He wasn't just thinking about her story. He was thinking about his own, the long hours, the pressure, the weight of the world he had tried to carry alone. All the times he had felt isolated, even surrounded by people. The times he had succeeded wildly and still felt empty. He glanced over at her again. "Maybe I've been searching in the wrong places all along." The girl gave a quiet smile. "Sometimes," she said, "we just have to stop and listen." Elon's chest rose and fell with a long breath. He didn't know what to say. He didn't even know what he felt. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the need to solve anything. He didn't feel the urge to respond with logic or theory. He just sat there, with her words echoing softly inside him. Elon sat with his hands resting loosely in his lap, his eyes on the dirt path that wound through the park. He didn't look at her right away. Instead, he let the quiet stretch, unbroken, just long enough to feel its weight. "I've always chased answers," he finally said. "Things I can solve, problems I can fix. But some things can't be solved." The little girl nodded, not with pity but with understanding. "Believing doesn't mean having all the answers," she said gently. "It means trusting that love is still real, even when we're confused, even when things don't make sense." Elon looked at her, caught off guard by the depth of her words. "My mom says God listens even when we're sad, or angry, or don't know what to say," she continued. "He doesn't stop listening just because we're not sure how to believe." She glanced up at the clouds above them, her expression soft. "She told me once that God's love is so big our minds can't even hold it, that it's bigger than any question, bigger than any fear." Elon was silent. He hadn't expected this conversation, not today, not ever, but now that he was in it, he realized how much he needed it. "Do you really believe he listens to everyone?" he asked, his voice lower now, more vulnerable. She turned her head and looked at him with those same calm eyes. The corners of her mouth turned up slightly as she gave a slow, certain nod. "Even you," she said. The words landed softly, but with a power he couldn't explain. He didn't respond. He couldn't. For the first time, faith didn't feel like something to debate or disprove. It didn't feel like a system or a rule book or a set of beliefs. It felt like something simpler, quieter. It felt like truth. Not the kind you test in a lab, not the kind you launch into space, but the kind that waits for you in the quiet moments. The kind that's always been there, even when you weren't looking. Elon didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just sat there beside her, letting the weight of it all wash over him. And for once, he didn't feel alone. The sun had started its slow descent beyond the trees, casting long shadows across the grass and painting the sky in layers of orange, pink, and deepening blue. The clouds, soft and stretched, caught the light like brushstrokes on a canvas. It was the kind of sunset that had inspired poems, paintings, and quiet sighs for centuries. But for Elon, it had always been something scientific, a matter of particles, angles, and atmospheric scattering. Until now, the little girl pointed toward the horizon, her voice gentle. "My mom says sunsets are God's way of reminding us he's always there, even when we can't see him." Elon looked up, following her gaze. He'd seen thousands of sunsets. He had watched them from rocket launch pads, desert labs, and private rooftops. But tonight, for the first time, he didn't see equations in the sky. He saw something beautiful. Not because it was new, but because something inside him had shifted, just enough to see with different eyes. She turned to him again, her voice almost a whisper. "Do you ever wonder why you're here?" Elon didn't answer right away. He didn't know how. For most of his life, that question had felt vague, even irrelevant. He was too busy building, fixing, solving. But now he wasn't so sure. He wasn't certain of the answer, but he wanted to ask the question. That in itself felt like a beginning. The little girl stood, brushing her hands against her dress and stretched slightly before looking at him one last time. "I should probably go. My mom's waiting for me." Elon nodded. His voice was quiet. "Thank you for talking to me." She smiled, eyes glowing with the softness of someone who had shared something important. "It was nice to talk to you too. Remember, God's always there. You just have to believe." With that, she turned and began to walk down the path, her small figure gradually fading into the growing shadows of evening. The sound of her footsteps disappeared, replaced by the quiet rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds settling in for the night. Elon remained seated on the bench, watching the colors above him shift into deeper hues. The stars would be out soon. He knew them all, the constellations, the names, the coordinates. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about what lay beyond them. He was thinking about what lay within. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the need to rush to the next thing. He didn't feel the pressure to solve anything. He just sat, alone on the bench, but not lonely. His heart was quiet, and in that quiet, there was something he hadn't felt in years: peace. Elon tilted his head back and looked up at the sky. The stars were beginning to emerge, faint at first, then stronger with each passing minute. Tiny lights scattered across a vast, endless canvas. They had always been his companions, the silent guides in his lifelong quest for exploration and understanding. He knew their patterns, their distances, their temperatures. He had studied them, charted them, and even reached toward them. But tonight, they didn't feel like data points. They felt like something more. For the first time, Elon wondered if what he had been searching for all these years wasn't out there in the stars, but somewhere much closer. Maybe it wasn't in the engines he'd designed or the missions he'd launched. Maybe it wasn't waiting on Mars or buried in a physics equation. Maybe it was here in the silence, in the stillness of a quiet park, in the words of a little girl with eyes full of trust, in a sunset, in the way the air cooled as the light faded. Maybe it was in the question itself, the one he had never dared to ask. He closed his eyes for a moment and breathed in deeply. Then, with no ceremony, no script, and no audience, he whispered a quiet prayer. He didn't know exactly what he was saying. He didn't know if anyone was listening. But it felt honest, it felt real. And that was enough. He didn't know what came next. He wasn't sure what he believed or how long the feeling would last. But for this moment, this still, sacred moment, he didn't need all the answers. For the first time, believing didn't feel like surrender. It felt like peace. And sometimes, peace is the beginning of everything. If this incredible story touched you, subscribe for more inspiring stories that explore life, faith, and the quiet truths that shape us all.